Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. What is up? Welcome back to Big Fat 5, a podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum. My name is Ben Hilsinger, and I am coming to you from my hotel room in London right now. I have been traveling a lot with my band Cannons the last 2 weeks, and because of that, I have not been able to schedule an episode, or I guess a guest to interviewed for a new episode, and as you know, I rarely have a lot of these cataloged, so this week, we're going to do another edition of a re-airing of Save It for the Pod, featuring one of my good friends, Gunnar Olsen, and I'm not too upset about it because I am bringing back this segment, so I'm going to try and get you guys a little more into the chasms of our friendship. And so this week, we are talking about the seemingly underrated drummer for Radiohead, Mr. Phil Selway, and so me and Gunnar both bring on 5 beats that we love, and we dissect them in our own grammatically incorrect ways, and we just talk about a lot of other things regarding drumming and not being too hard on yourself, and we get so deep, you know? Anyways, I have to go play a show, but I will talk to you guys later. Love you, and I will be having more new episodes coming up soon, but I'm talking too much, so bye.
So what are we doing today, Ben? What are we talking about?
I am good. Welcome to Big Fat 5, a podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum. And I will answer your question. Just let me do my damn intro.
I like that I said, what are we doing? And you said, I'm doing good. Okay,
well, that's what we're doing. We're doing me being well.
All right.
Anyway, so I have Gunnar Olsen on the show. Although you're not really a guest, you're my co-host today. So thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, sick. You're welcome.
But what we are doing today is talking about Phil Selway. A lot of you in our discussions are just talking drums. And a lot of times it's about a particular person or a particular performance. And so I think you sent me a video of, was it Radiohead in the Basement for In Rainbows?
Yes, I think it's from the basement. Just, if we're going to talk about stuff, we got to get it right because that's when the trolls come out.
Exactly. Well, stop interrupting me. Anyway, so that's kind of what we decided to go down a rabbit hole of, like, let's just stop talking over text and DM and let's just talk about it on the pod.
Yeah. Save it for the pod is what I said.
Yes.
This is great stuff. No more talking till we get on that pod.
All right. Do you want to go first? Because I actually don't. Well, because it's called Big Fat 5. So I chose 5. You chose 5. I actually chose more than 5 in case our 5 overlap. But
yeah, I chose 7. I will choose to talk about 5 unless we have to go into overtime.
So yes, Phil Selway, the drummer, the only drummer for Radiohead. I kind of take that back because they have like a second drummer live now, right?
Well, I don't know who knows what's happening now.
Okay.
that could go. That means a lot these days. I know Clive. Yeah, Clive Deemer's been playing with them. I mean, I don't know officially, but at least the last 2 record cycles, I think live, he's been playing with them. I don't think he records with them, but I know he's one of the 2 drummers who plays with Portishead, one of my favorite bands. And the funny thing about him and Phil playing together is they both have. I don't know if if they both shave their heads or both bald. I'm not going to make any assumptions on that. They both currently have.
They look very.
They both have no hair, and they play kind of matching kits, and it's fun to watch. It kind of looks like Phil in a clone.
It's funny too because from the Basement when they were doing, I think it was King of Limbs, the first like 5 minutes they're not showing Phil. Phil's playing, but like the camera angle is only this other drummer, and I was like, that looks like Phil. It's not Phil.
Yeah.
And it was a mind trip for a second.
You know, I gotta say, I watched those two From the Basement videos. If you don't know what we're talking about, when the album In Rainbows came out, I think 2007, they did a live performance of the whole record and some other songs on a show called From the Basement, which was, I think, Nigel Godrich's show. And he's been their kind of main producer, collaborator for, I think, since the Bends, he's been working with them.
I thought it was on. I thought he began on OK Computer, but I could be wrong.
I feel like he was working on the Bends, and then OK Computer, he got the bump up.
Okay.
Maybe.
There are definitely some songs on the Bends that I could be like, okay, that sounds like a Nigel direction, and some are not.
But I think he had a show briefly, or maybe it's still ongoing, where he gets people to come into, I'm assuming, his studio, and they play albums or songs, and he records it. And I feel like I was a little late to the Radiohead game. I bought the first record when it came out because I liked Creep. I was in 8th grade, and then I did not like the record. I was just not a fan of the rest of Pablo Honey. And it wasn't until 2000, I was on tour, I think in 2003 in Switzerland, and for some reason I decided I wanted to give Radiohead another chance. And I bought this it was a CD. I think it's called I Might Be Wrong. It's a live CD that came out right after Amnesiac, and it's mostly those songs. But there's also a few older songs, but like everything in its right place. It was definitely like the version of Radiohead that's a little more experimental, electronic. And that was also kind of where I was going as a fan of music. So that version of the band made more sense to me. But I remember thinking, oh, I like these beats. I remember thinking I don't really like the drummer that much. And that was probably more where I was just at mentally of what I liked in the drums. Mm-hmm. But I was still a fan of the band. I got really into their next few records, Hail to the Thief and In Rainbows, and I saw them a few times. I saw them at Coachella in 2004. They were playing a bunch of Hail to the Thief stuff. I saw them in 2000. I saw them a bunch in like a 4-year period, primarily around In Rainbows, and I really got into that record. And I remember when this video that we keep talking about, From the Basement, came out, I knew I really liked the drums and production on all the songs, but I know a lot of it's kind of cut up and super edited, and I kind of attributed that more to Johnny Greenwood and Tom York, and I was like, oh, these guys take the drums and make them into something really cool. And that's what I liked about it, not really giving Phil too much credit. And when I saw the live performance of From the Basement, I was like, oh, it just totally made me a super fan. I think a lot of it's how just the way he plays these beats that on the record are so manipulated and so edited and cut up, but it still sounds so much like him. So I was like, oh, okay. As much as they might be editing and choosing what they want to use of his, they're still capturing his essence. And I was wrong to not give him more credit, if that makes sense. So I'm basically
you were very wrong.
I'm basically admitting that I just was like, oh yeah, he's like a fine drummer, and then they like make it really cool. And the way he plays live, it's like that Ringo thing where Ringo, people had all these feelings about Ringo forever, and now everyone loves him. But at the time, people were pretty hard on him, just like, oh, is he even the best drummer in the Beatles, or blah blah blah. And it's that similar thing where if it wasn't him playing these things, it wouldn't sound the way it sounds, right?
Wrong. No, of course you're right.
The end.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. Yeah.
Oh, were you talking?
Yeah, sorry. We'll start recording.
Yeah.
No, I agree. You kept bringing up In Rainbows. That is the one that I love melody. I mean, genre just kind of gets in the way for me. Something has to be catchy, and a lot of Kid A, Amnesiac, Hail to the Thief, because that was kind of my upbringing when I was really getting into music and kind of figuring out what I liked. It was just too out there for me, and Not anymore, but getting into it, it was just hard. And In Rainbows, when that one came out, it felt like Tom was the whole band was kind of going, okay, let's respect the melody a little more, respect maybe a little more approachable form. And I would say don't 3/4 of In Rainbows start with drums in some way, like organic drums. It's a very organic record.
I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah, I mean, for sure. It definitely felt like they went down this rabbit hole of we're going to keep kind of like they were just being a band for themselves, right? It feels like everything they were doing, this is what we want to be doing. This is our artistic expression. And I think that's what their fans like about them. And I think they're a great kind of role model for bands in the sense where if you keep changing your sound, but that's kind of part of your essence, like people can never be like, oh, they don't sound like Radiohead anymore because they keep changing, but the evolution always has this kind of connection to the last part. And I feel like that record, In Rainbows was kind of the record where there's all the fun electronic blippy blop stuff, but there's also really great songs with guitars. And when you watch From the Basement and you see how everyone's choosing when to play at a lot of points, there's 3 guitars playing, which is kind of a lot to deal with mentally. Just like when you're listening to music, to like be able to figure out like what 3 guitars, it can be very easily too much information. And when you watch them play that record live, everyone has these very specific lanes and textures. And so when you and I were texting the other night, I was like, oh man, I haven't watched this in probably 10 years. And I love the first From the Basement, and then they did it again for King of Limbs. And I don't like that one that much because, like you said, what they're choosing to show you in terms of like who's playing what, it feels a little more removed from the music, where From the Basement, the first version In Rainbows, I feel like they're constantly showing you this is what's happening in the song and this person's playing it, and kind of made you appreciate it more. Like, oh, there's this really cool, really simple bass line that Colin's playing, and they show that. And the second one, and this is more for the video editor of that, and I'm sure they're listening to this, and you know, I know they spent a lot of time on it, but it's just not as good.
I hope they're fired now because of this, and you can have that on your hands. All right, so why don't you just start with number 1, and then we'll kind of go back and forth.
All right, the first song, I'm going to go with the live recording that I was mentioning. It's called I Might Be Wrong, and it's the live version of Morning Bell by Radiohead.
Who's on drums?
I think it's in, I don't know. It's in a weird time signature. I always think it's 5. I haven't actually counted it in a long time. I'm going to assume it's 5. Maybe it's not.
They like 5.
They do like 5. 5 is fun. I'm not a fan of quintuplets, but I do like the time signature of 5. There's this one very specific part because he's going and then one part, I know this is really interesting. He goes, he kind of repeats the little 1, 2, 3 snare fill over the bar line, and I it's one of those things where I can't tell if he did that on the recording or if they chopped it up, but it just. It really feels, it has that like DJ Shadow, like super, I don't know. It just, his ability to sound like a loop that's been cut up is really cool. And this is an example of like, the funny part is I heard this before I heard the album recording. so I didn't know enough about the band to know like, oh, is this a loop live? Is this da da da? And he sounds like a loop, which in a really cool way, where there's like there's that ebb and flow of the time. It pushes and pulls. It's not perfect, but it's so consistent in its sound. It's just really impressive to me. Oh, and I want to show you this in honor of talking about Phil.
Yes, I was going to bring that up, actually. Tell people what you're holding up.
I'm holding up a picture. I'm holding up a break. Jesus Christ. I'm holding up a Zildjian breakbeat ride. It's an 18-inch ride, and it's the ride that he definitely used, I want to say, for the kind of OK Computer to in Rainbow's era. Maybe before, maybe since, but definitely for 3 or 4 records. And it's just a super dry, small ride that I think Zach Danziger was kind of part of the creation of there was like the remix line in the Zildjian series. Is that, I don't know.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure. But it's a really dead dry ride that I think it's supposed to have a very electronic, short decay, almost if you can imagine like drum and bass, amen break. Like he used that ride cymbal for years, and I remember trying to figure out what it was for so long, and it wasn't until way later that I ended up getting. My friend Sam had one, and he sold it, and I bought it from him.
So I always grew up thinking bigger cymbals were better, and my 2 drummers that I pull from a lot are Phil Selway and Steve Shelley from Sonic Youth, and they
nice.
Both have ridiculously small cymbals.
Yeah, I mean, I think Phil definitely used some splashes early on, but
I mean, it was 93. You have to.
Yeah, exactly. It was a law. There was a law passed.
Well, that just before we go off from that cymbal, I do want to say that I remember when you showed me a video of you playing a song that I won't say it because maybe that'll be one of your options you choose. But you were hitting it, and at first hearing of it, you're like, that kind of sounds like shit, and then you're like, but it sounds so cool. Yeah. And that's kind of how I would sum up that cymbal. It's like a shitty dead cymbal that is so perfect at the same time.
Yeah. I didn't pick that song because that's a Tom York song, but there are some videos on my Instagram page where I'm playing along to the Tom York record Eraser, using this ride as a crash, and yeah, it does kind of sound. It's a jarring sound in the sense where you hit it and then it just kind of the sound stops. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that works really well in kind of this hybrid electronic music where maybe you want to really compress the drums and make them sound slightly non-organic. And it's great for that because you hit it and the sound, it's like a gate. It sound like they created a cymbal that has a built-in gate, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to say this is one of my favorite songs of all time, and it's All I Need, which is, if I could choose everything, mine would all be off In Rainbows, but it's All I Need off In Rainbows, and that drum sound the whole record's just super tight. You can tell he's using small cymbals, small drums, super close mic'd.
Tiny sticks.
And the snare is like really highly tuned, but it's also very dead. We'll drop on the audio right now, All I Need by Radiohead off In Rainbows. So that beat, the first half of the beat, boot, boot, tat, boot, so simple. But when he adds, and a kind of a through line with my choices, by the way, are I don't get off on technicalities or technical stuff. I get off on choices. That's what, as a middle-aged man, that's what really does it for me. And just that boot, boot, tat, boot, boot, tat. It's kind of in that bastardized, not swung. I mean, it's on the of 3 if we're gonna get technical, but. Yeah. It's not swung. It's not right on the like straight 16th note, and it just adds this weird disorientation to the groove, and so I love that. And then also the hi-hat pattern that it's just eighth notes, And then I believe it's in the second verse. There's 2 times where he just randomly just stops doing the hi-hat randomly.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was a decision or if he just was like, I'll do it now. But I pull from that all the time.
It's very,
because like as a younger, go ahead.
No, it's very hip hop, right? Like it's like that. It's a hip hop beat. I remember like when I got into like Timberland and all that, like there's like all those big hits of his have that, like, it's all about like the moments where there's no drums, there's no bass. And I feel like this is kind of their, like they wanted to make like a hip hop beat. And again, like when you hear that recording, it's hard. It almost sounds like a sample, like they sampled it from something. And then you see like from the basement or see them live, and it's just, that's what he sounds like. He's definitely a very behind the beat player. So like that whole song has this feeling of like, is he gonna make it to the one, right?
Sure.
And yeah, it's hard to say. Like, were those pauses you're talking about like edited? Did he play them? I love that song at the end because it's just him like like riding a crash cymbal, which I feel like normally in a mix you would try to like bring it down, and it's just like, it's kind of almost the hook of that part where it's just so loud, and then you watch him play it and he's tapping it, but you know, it's all about the compression. It's all about how he is self-mixed, so it feels loud, but we could probably talk over it. Like my guess is he's not hitting the drums that hard, which
we just play the song in the background.
Which I think is I used to pride myself on how hard I could hit the drums, especially live. I wanted to like impress people, like, look at that idiot hitting the drums way too hard. And then as I've gotten more into recording and stuff, you realize it's people who play like Phil that record so well because they're not hitting the drums any harder than they need to be hit. They're just hitting them just right. And I really, if people are still listening to this, and they haven't seen From the Basement, the version on that is great, and it shows him playing it all, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, speaking of not hitting hard, I think because I do it to mask my failures and some of my technicalities. Like, I overcompensate with just looking cool when I play. And people like Phil, that he's never set himself up like his drum set wise, and he doesn't try to look cool. And the older I get, someone that just never tries to look cool is the coolest guy in the room.
Yeah.
And Phil is that. So that is my choice for number 1. But yeah, that song, real quick before we move on, is a good example of kind of the way they do in Rainbows, which is a lot of the songs are in these like 2 parts. And that song is definitely in the tight hi-hat, and then it just opens up randomly with a big, like, you know, flam on the 4, and then just cruises till the end.
How about we go to There from Hail to the Thief? I mean, it's almost like the hook of the song.
Yeah.
Like they've been slowly building, and then bob it up, and then we like go back to 0 and start over again. This song is cool because there's a lot of drum overdubs, and at least when I've seen them play it, I think both guitarists, Johnny and Ed, are playing like rims, and they have these aux. Before, like having an extra floor tom or drums on stage was really uncool. These guys made it cool, and then like I feel like people bastardized the floor tom in the front of the stage for the singer. And my apologies if any of you played in a band like this, but these guys did it first. Yeah, it's just great. Like it's all about the texture, a lot of rims, and it's a very unassuming drum part. It's just, I couldn't even tell you what he's playing, but he's playing something I'm assuming on a floor tom, a cross stick, and then there's these big moments of a big snare fill, and then the song resets, and at some point he rocks it out a little bit more. And I don't know, there's something about that fill Oh. That
Okay, I think Eric already made the Phil Collins joke earlier. No, I think it was Daru Jones. So I do like, I mean, those toms are so overtony and so like they have a note.
Yeah.
There's not many times you can really tell people, like, sometimes it matters if you tune the drums to the song, and that one really does. Because if that one was open and they didn't do a good job teching that, that would have been probably the most annoying drum beat to play in the world.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I feel like we're currently in this world of very dead drums. It's like a Fleetwood Mac drum sound revival, at least of the
Easy
snare.
Gunnar. Remember what podcast you're on.
No, it's great. Everyone loves it. And the reason everyone loves it is because it's a sound that is obtainable. But to make a drum set be live and have overtones and ring and work, that kind of where we started with this conversation, where I'd been recording myself playing the drums all day and feeling bad about myself.
Let's talk about that.
It's easier for me to throw a big fat snare drum or some tape or whatever on a drum and give it more character, and that's great. But there is a true art in being able to record a wide open drum kit and have that sound. And that my favorite part about Radiohead is you can't just slap one guy on the back, right? Like, I love Van Halen because I love Eddie Van Halen. I love Alex Van Halen. David Lee Roth is kind of fun. Michael Anthony, great vocals, great bass playing. But if you're a fan of Van Halen, it's really about Eddie Van Halen a lot of the time for me. It's just he's so otherworldly. But with Radiohead, it's a real sum of everybody's parts, where like there's some song, like their bass player Colin is maybe, in my opinion, the most underrated bass player of a generation. Like his choices, his feel, and like I said, I have no idea what goes into making their songs, but I know a lot of it has to do with Nigel's production and Tom York and Johnny Greenwood and their influence of like editing stuff. But yeah, that's a great song. I don't know where I was going with that.
Thanks for being here for the Van Halen show.
Yeah. We're talking about this
song,
Panama. That's the next song, right?
Yeah. It's just all the times Phil covered Panama on his Instagram that he's so active on. So this isn't one of my choices, but Weird Fishes, great drum beat, and the bass part on that you were talking about, Colin, is amazing.
Yep.
So we can always go back to that song. But I want to go to let's go to Dollar and Cents, because I think that's a good kind of bridge from what you just talked about. Because that one, well, let's just drop it in. Dollar and Cents off Amnesiac. I am a sucker, and I will always be a sucker for just like eighth note rides on top of kind of, because it has this like white noise that kind of just kind of fills everything in, and you can kind of do anything underneath that. And maybe it's because I'm not really good with Latin music, but it automatically sounds Latin to me if you have like this little soft ride cymbal going.
Yeah.
And he builds on that with, I'm not sure if it's bongos or if it's his left hand's just kind of doing stuff on the toms. You said you just looked at a live version, so maybe that is what he's doing?
The live version sounds like he's playing ride and going between the toms. And and my first thought was it sounded like the version. It sounds like they're putting a ton of reverb on. It sounds like he's doing cross stick. Got to do go between like high and low tom. But there's a ton of reverb on cross stick, which is on the one, which almost sounds like a wood block.
Yeah.
Which maybe it is, but who knows?
I always thought that was like an overdub because it is so reverby that, because he does bring up, and this is kind of what I want to talk about, in the chorus, I guess you would call it, the B section, when Tom does switch it up, he brings in the snare similar to that woodblock sound, that's not as reverby. So I always thought that was kind of an overdub. Maybe it was Colin or them doing something on top of it. But he just does it during the chorus. But going back into the A section, he kind of keeps his snare goes over into beats like 2 and 3, and then he goes back to the cross stick. So it makes me think that they were doing it live, or it was a live take, and he was like, "Oh shit, we're back in the smaller section now." And again, it's a through line throughout all my choices that sometimes I'm like, it's so through composed, and then sometimes it feels that it was just a jam, and then they either left it or cut it up from there. But I love that because it's like, oh, that doesn't make sense, but it's Radiohead, so it does.
Right. Yeah, it would be interesting to know, was that a mess up, and then when they agreed on that being the version, do they then learn what they, that's the question I have. Is he going back and learning what they edited of his drums, or was that the original idea? And we'll never know. But
well, Phil's on the show next week, so we'll ask him.
That would be so cool.
I have reached out, so Phil, if you're listening to this, come on, dude.
Let us know. We want to know. So we just want to know.
And so, just to finish that thought on this song, the restraint on that song, because there's a lot of room. And if again, I keep summing up Phil, but he is a master of restraint. He knows how to because there's 4 other people in the band that are freaking amazing. Let them do their thing.
Yeah, there's no ego with his playing. I feel like sometimes that can come across as a lack of confidence, maybe. I don't know. Like, it's everything he's playing, there's a choice. It's thought out. It's just very musical. And I feel like if drummers need anything more right now in 2020, other than what's going on in the world,
other than a job,
it's just like remembering that we're playing music. The reason the reason I got into the drums was because I loved music, and my dad's a musician, my mom loved music, and so I was always playing in the house. But it's the music. It's the best drummers are the best musicians, and I go back to my thinking not so much of Phil and realizing that was on me. That was expecting something out of him that was on me. I found myself, I recorded something for a friend yesterday. He told me that he sent me the file. He told me the BPM. And it was pretty loose. Like, it was not, when I was playing with the click and his recording, it was loose. It was not feeling great. And I didn't really know what to do. And I was like, do I play the click? Do I play to the music? And I ended up giving him versions of both, but there was a few takes where I just turned the click off and played with his playing. And I don't do that so often, right? We're living in a slightly more quantized world where if someone sends you a track, it's usually pretty gridded, but there was some stuff that was way off the grid. But when I turned off the click and I just played with his piano part, it ended up feeling really good. And it's that like reminder that like we are human. We're not supposed to sound quantized. And if you go back and listen to any of your favorite bands, I feel like all of us I feel like everyone who's listening to this, but I feel like drummers as a whole, our ears are getting better because the level of talent right now, just like on Instagram, YouTube, is so high, right? Like, these drummers are playing these acrobatic, athletic level, like super level of drumming, right? And it's so precise, and it's sometimes it bums me out because I'm a human and I don't always sound like that. But if you go back and listen to your favorite records, they're not perfect. And I think our ears maybe notice that more now. But that's the best part of a record, is that moment of when they leave in that moment that's not perfect, right? And
100%.
And I feel like there's something about Phil's playing that's so genuine, and it's just so musical. I want to add to our list the song Pyramid Song. If you go to Pyramid Song, it's on Amnesiac, right?
Yeah, it's the second song.
Go to 159, and that's kind of where the drums come in. And there's just this moment he's kind of doing these drags from the snare to the ride, and then it's just great. It feels so great.
That's sick. That's some jazz chops there. He sounds really, really good.
What I like about the song is, like, can you imagine being in a band and someone brings in that piano part? Like, they're just playing that. Like, cool. So what are you going to play? It's just like, where do you go with that? And
Yeah.
like, I don't, just all the setups he does on the kit. It sounds like he's playing a jazz kit, like super high toms. Like it has that kind of Portishead, almost like sampled from old jazz recordings sound. And the ride is just so lush. All the like snare, it's super compressed, but it's so behind the music. It's never heavy. It's never saying I'm the drummer. It's just totally just being back, like Serge Gainsbourg. Like it's that thing, that really cool. As a drummer, it's not super exciting, but like when you get to the next level of your appreciation of drums, it becomes like the coolest thing for me.
I would like to consider myself in that, not maybe playing wise, but appreciation wise. I'm in that second spot right now. Because to go back what you were saying earlier, the crazy drummers that are I mean, respectfully, I might get myself in trouble with this, but I mean, I run the Big Fat Snare Drum Instagram, so I am inundated with those guys all day. All I see is just I've seen every choppy video you could see on Instagram during the day. We're tagged in it, or for some reason it shows up on my feed. As a personal drummer, that really does nothing for me these days. So I don't feel like it doesn't make me sad because I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That stuff, both you and me are talking about. We're not talking about anything technical that Phil's doing, but that kind of stuff gets me off. Like, because you can think, oh, he's just doing a little rough on the ride cymbal. Okay, well, you put your phone on the other side of the room, record yourself doing it. Can you make it sound that good?
Yeah.
Maybe. I hope you can, but I don't think I could.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how simple parts can be very hard to actually execute in a timeless way that sell a lot of records.
Right. Yeah, it's about, I think his whole thing is very responsive. It's responding to the music. It's listening. It's not, there's not, like, I kind of go back to my statement. There's not a lot of ego in it. I'm also not a fan of the, like, serve the song, man, but it's doing that.
Why not?
Well, because I think there's time. Like, some of my favorite musical moments.
I am so blinded.
I really hope you share this.
Yeah,
it just looks like it's like, so my conversation with Jesus today about In Rainbows. There's definitely moments where members of a band aren't serving the song, and that's what is awesome about a song. I don't know. Who are we to say what's right or not? I only bring this up because I think there's no set rules. Mm-hmm. It's all about the drummer is what I'm really trying to say.
Well, when there is no rules, but then it's also, you look at the style of drumming in, let's say, Pablo Honey, the Bends, even parts of OK Computer, those aren't so much timeless drum decisions that he made, respectfully. I think because of the drums, some of those songs are very stylized. Like that's definitely a 90s song.
Right.
But I could say that some of his choices going from like Kid A on are very, like, they could kind of come out any time. I don't think they have necessarily, those choices are never going to get old. So I think that's when he really found his stride.
I agree. I don't have much to say. Like, yeah, you're right. You nailed it. I don't even need to be here. Great talk.
All right, so I'll go actually to mine because you brought up a song in 5, so I'm gonna say 15 Step by In Rainbow, or it's off In Rainbows.
Yep.
Which is I believe the second song off In Rainbows.
First song.
It is the first song off In Rainbows.
How dare
obviously.
you?
And so yeah, that song's in 5, and that's a great example of.
I feel it more in 10 than in 5, which I realize is kind of the same thing. I'm kind of just busting your balls, but I feel like it's a long enough.
I want to hear this. Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's more of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now they both technically work, but I feel like it's more of a 10-8 than a 5-4.
See, I would, and yeah, this is when people will stop listening. But I actually view it when I say 5, I mean 5-8, because I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because that's how the drum part loops.
Right, but the pattern is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like, I feel like the pattern doesn't repeat until 10 beats have happened.
Well, let's plug it in, and then we'll let the audience decide. I should just play High and Dry.
Right. It'd be great if every time you cut to the audio, it's just creep.
Because the real comes with boom, boom,
yeah, it's that. What's great about that song is that he's doing a 5, 1, 2, get the 4, 5, 1, 2, get the 5, and then the program part is 1, get, ba, ba, ba. So the program part's kind of maybe a 10, and his playing is a 5. It sounds like I'm rating it. I would say the electronic part's
it's
more.
It's a 5.5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Have you ever seen Aaron Spears playing this song?
No. Is it like too choppy? Like, does he kind of like have fun with it?
No, it's fun because you can tell. I think it was part of his clinics or something. You could tell he was just a fan of the song, and I mean, he definitely like opens it up. Like, Aaron's one of my favorite drummers. I think he's the perfect example of like being about the music, but having these otherworldly chops. But they're all based in music, so it's like anything. It's all about the choices you make, and there's some fun videos of him playing along to this song, doing stuff that doesn't really make sense, but is also really fun to watch.
The reason why I love this song so much is because the first time I heard it, I was like, okay, I think it's in 5 because there's that very, and then I'm like, I don't know, as a drummer, I don't know what I would do from there. And then when Phil comes in, I'm like, oh, that's a cool choice. That's how he boop da da boop da boop da. There's so many ways you can take that, and I know that Phil is a great example of someone who, I'm assuming that he doesn't program all the things. I'm assuming Tom, who's also a drummer, will bring something in, idea, and then it's not just like, oh, here's a chord progression. How do you play drums on that? Like maybe in the song you just mentioned, the Pyramid song. Yeah. Sometimes I'm sure there's a drum beat and you have to kind of go all Dennis Chambers and be like, how can I kind of dance around this? Yeah.
I think 15 Step is, and feel free to use this I know we were talking amongst each other. I think what's great about the beat, like the song starts with a pretty specific beat that's programmed, and then the drums come in not playing that beat, but they work with what you've already heard. And somehow these two beats playing together are not overkill. And maybe that's because it's mostly just drums and vocals, a little bit of guitar. But imagine being able to figure out that Tetris of music where, like, I'm going to make this really specific 2-bar phrase, and then the drummer is going to play a 1-bar phrase at the same time. It's not too much. And again, that was another song when I saw From the Basement and saw them playing it live. it's a lot. As a drummer who plays a lot with electronics live in bands that I play with, it is a struggle to like figure out, we're human, so we're gonna flam against certain things. So maybe like when I play with big data, like do we keep the kicks out of the track? So like blah blah blah, and like when Radiohead does it, they just go all in. It's like, here's the beat, here's the drums, and they're dancing together, they're flamming at times, but it says a lot about Phil's drumming that they just leave in the beat and he plays over it, like live versions of Idiotech, live versions of Mixomatosis, like big electronic songs where they have the beat super loud and he's just as loud, and they work together, and they're not perfect, and I feel like they're embracing the idea that it's like man versus machine, and I just love that so much.
I 100% agree. And I kind of touched on this in the last episode. When you hear an entire like half of the song with no flams, you're like, oh, he probably actually was that tight with it.
Right.
Because if they didn't fix the other thing, they're not going to like just fix the second half, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So your mistakes make you appreciate your not mistakes 10 times more.
Yeah. And I like to think of those moments like whenever I'm like super hard on myself and I'm playing something and it's not perfect. I think about stuff like this, which is my favorite stuff, which is not perfect. And the second it's not you, it rolls right off your back and you're like, that's cool. That's really cool that it's not quote unquote perfect. And I feel like Phil's a great example of that. Just like it's all about the music. It's all about the feeling of something. And maybe that's what's perfect. Maybe.
Aw, that was cute.
Like a little like background
now
music.
you know. I mean, I know this is such an old like trope, but it's like we're losing people that are too insecure to put out the flams and put out the stuff that's not perfect. Those errors that aren't errors, they're just you. And that's not to be like all Full House about it, but like that's what people love about certain people's playing, is that not their inabilities to do certain things, but just the way they get from A to B is different than I would do it, and neither of those versions are quantized, but you do it in a cool way.
Back when I was touring with Big Data, like I would have these conversations with Alan, and I was convinced that the best part of every show was some moment that got off the grid. Like maybe the audio cut out, or maybe I fell off the grid slightly and you're hearing some track. I don't know. Like there was always these moments that were human because we're playing with, especially with Big Data. And most of the bands I'm playing with these days, but that band was very on tracks and this and that. But there was something about these moments where there was almost like the curtain revealed of it not being perfect. And you'd feel this surge from the audience where like, it wasn't like, and like the audience has your back. I think you always like worry like, oh, if I'm not perfect, they're going to hate me. And there's something about those moments that like there was a show where like the last half of a song, the computer broke and we had to finish it with just whatever live instrumentation we had. And I remember like it cut out and I was really panicked. And then there was this roar from the crowd. Like they could tell that we were like in the moment dealing with something and like reacting to it, and they got off on that, and it was just like so cool. People are okay with things when things are too perfect. When you go see a show and it's like everything about it is so perfect, it ends up feeling like nothing. I think we need these moments to like realize like, oh yeah, they're human. I'm human. Like we're here trying to do something.
And I will say, this is another anecdote from me. It was like a few weeks ago. So I'm in my home studio right now. I live with a guy, and we like do some co-writes together. And the other day, my drum mics were not set up, and he's like, "Just put something down because I have an idea in this tempo. Can you just go in the room?" We literally set up like an SM57 on the floor, and he's like, "Dude, just jam at like 140 for like 3 minutes," and I just jammed. And so we went in there, and I did it, and we came back in the control room. He was playing it, and I was just like, self-doubt. Like, I hate everything I just did. I feel so bad. I don't like the feel, and whatever. Went on with my life. 2 weeks later, I come downstairs. He's working on that song. I forgot what the song was, and he was still using my drum loops, and I was like, oh, which addictive drummer pack is that? That sounds rad.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, that's you.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, like, the second that I didn't associate it with my playing, I was like, oh, that's a cool feel.
No, it's great when you sneak up on yourself and you hear something and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Okay, so I think you just went. Is it my turn?
Sure.
My choice is Myxomatosis. I did not just say that twice. Off Hail to the Thief. So that one is cool because the song's in 4/4, but the drum beat implies that it's not. Because the first time I heard it, it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? Obviously, it's Radiohead, so it could be weird for the sake of being weird. And then you listen to that synth part, and the synth part is just a loop, is in 4/4. And it almost made me want to go back in their catalog and be like, how many songs do I think are weird, but they're just Phil kind of dancing around the beat? This one is kind of the best. It's the best example of that. Yeah, just for a drummer to imply this weird, disorienting feel on top of a song that other drummers might just do something a lot more simple, but that's what makes Phil's instincts great.
Yeah, this is another one of those where like it's hard to tell if they chopped him up and then because they play this on From the Basement as well, and I feel like he's doing a great impersonation of that performance. So it's hard to say like which came first. So they edit it and then he learned that. Is that what he played? And then he plays it live. That beat's great because it starts with a snare on the one.
Yeah.
It's almost like faux reggaeton or something. There's like these, but there's moments where there's like kind of two sets and they bounce off each other.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like that's another. Sometimes I think it's not composed, and sometimes with that as an example, when he brings in that double, he's echoing himself, and so there has to be. He's cognizant of what he's doing because he's kind of going back. I mean, there's times when he's matching up, and sometimes it's really cool syncopation. So I think he knew when he was doing it. But sorry to interrupt. I just
no. It's a great song. I would also checking out the version of them playing it live because it's kind of one long phrase that the whole band is playing, but like on synths and guitar and yeah, it's really cool.
Just real quick with that song, it's the snare parts kind of follow Tom's vocals, and then sometimes they don't. But when they get to the chorus, he really does. I mean, Phil in general doesn't bring it up for choruses. It's not like in rock music you're like, oh, I gotta open the hi-hat or go to switch to the ride cymbal. He just knows how to make choices that you're like, okay, this is
the song is kind of one level, and then they just pull things out, and that's I was gonna say something really stupid, like some of their songs do that and some of them don't.
That was kind of stupid and kind of not.
I really like the drum beat on Where I End and You Begin, and the version that got me really pumped on. I knew the recorded version from Hail to the Thief, but seeing him play it live on From the Basement, he's playing this beat where his left hand is on his second snare, and the second snare, it sounds like the snares are off, so it has that kind of timbali feel. So he's almost doing a double, like it's almost like if you're playing a beat with two hands in your hi-hat, like 16th notes. But then if you take your left hand and put it on the second snare, which has this timbali sound, so what that gives you is this kind of almost this rolling, almost conga percussion part. And I think when I heard it, I didn't really think twice that it was him playing it all at once. But when you see him play, you're like, oh, that's like he's not playing the hardest beat in the world, but because he's breaking up between his hi-hat, side timbali, and snare, it ends up having this kind of, like you said earlier, like it's almost like faux Latin pop beat. And just seeing him play it was one of those like, oh, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to have one hand on this second side drum, and it was just kind of like an obvious like, oh, you can obviously do whatever you want, but it was I just had never thought about playing a beat like that, and it's great, and I think you should insert the song now. Boom.
So what's cool about that is the actual the album version. It's not a timbali. It's kind of it is a snare. He's doing a doom da, but on the From the Basement version, the snares are off on that side snare. You are correct.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those songs where like once I saw him playing it, I just assumed that's what he was doing on the like. I didn't think too much of the drum part until I saw him doing it, and I was like, oh, that just. I don't know. It speaks to me in a great way.
This could be just me because I have so much respect for Radiohead as like always kind of being on the forefront of what music is doing that I always assume the drum parts are harder than they are. And the cool thing about seeing them live, especially From the Basement, is it makes it less intimidating because you see what he's doing sometimes and you're like, oh, this sounds so rad and so timeless, but he's actually doing something very simple. And that's kind of my takeaway, is that it's always fun to see what a drummer's actually doing.
Right. I think it took me a while to like appreciate that. I think a lot of it has to do with just maturing as a drummer or a musician. Just if you change any of those drum parts, it just wouldn't be the same song.
I know I said All I Need is one of my favorite songs of all time, but this one, intro-wise, is probably top 2 for me. It's Reckoner from In Rainbows. And that whole record is very tight sonically, but this, I mean, if you want to find the best version of reverb, that song is like my North Star of like, this is what sounds so good and so powerful. The cool thing about this one too is we were talking about, you know, what I've been practicing lately. I've been practicing a lot of like Motown, a lot of Muscle Shoals kind of stuff from the 60s and 70s, and the drums are always panned, or a lot of the times they're panned all the way to the right. So for this song specifically, the main drum part, that's all the way to the right, and then it's like a shaker that I'm assuming Tom's doing. It might even be during his actual vocal take, because a lot of times there's some bleed. I also will say going into like the second verse, it's at a minute 28, but it's kind of it's the second time they go through the A section. The production just changes randomly. They just switch to a different mic. He's still doing the same beat.
I always wondered about that, if it was like they flip the phase or like they bring in other. Yeah, it's definitely when you hear the recording of this, it definitely to me sounds like maybe they made some loops, or there's the kind of like main part that kind of seems to repeat, but then it, like you said, it varies. It doesn't sound like it varies. Everything is very intentional sounding, right? And you and I were texting about this song the other night because when this song came out, they actually put all the stems on the internet and let people remix it. And I had just been getting into Ableton Live, so I downloaded all the stems and made like a remix with mostly just his vocals and made some other music. And what was really interesting about the vocal stem of that song, there's so much tambourine bleed, which means like whatever he was listening to was so loud that the microphones picked it up. I don't know if that means he was playing the. I kind of doubt he was recording the tambourine when he sang, but when you listen to the drum stem of the song, it definitely it's definitely not like a performance. There's definitely choices of we're going to repeat this 4 or 8 bars and then bring in something else. But then you watch him play it live, and it still has that same feeling, which goes to show that they would get very specific about something, but it wasn't because they couldn't do it. It wasn't looping for the sake of like, oh, like our drummer's not good. It was always an artistic choice. But the second you see them play it live, it's just as good because they're essentially like finding moments that their band members are creating. And so they're just it's all choices. It just goes back to what we were saying. It's just choices, and it's not editing for the sake of just doing it to make it. It's not like, oh, we're going to edit this because we want to make it perfect. It's like, we really like these 4 or 8 bars that he played, but when you see it live, it's going to have that same feel because they're just capturing his energy, right? Mm-hmm. I think I'm kind of out of songs. The only other song I was going to say is also from In Rainbows is the song Body Snatchers.
Okay.
And I just really, I keep talking about it, but the from the Basement version, I keep going back to saying, oh, that was the performance where I was like, this guy gets it. Like, this guy's doing really cool stuff. This song, Body Snatchers, Weird Fishes, very kind of iconic drum beat at the beginning. Like both those songs had this kind of, it's almost like a punk beat. It's a faster beat, but it's light. It's not like heavy. It's like if I played either of these songs, I would probably like go like a little like Queens of the Stone Age with it. Like, you know, they both have that kind of like 2 and 4 rock thing, but there's something about it where it feels more like art. It's almost like it feels more like an art music, like not art music, but no, there's just like this. There's like a very literal, like I am playing to get, like I am playing a rock beat, but it doesn't rock. Maybe that's like slightly an insult, but it's also the perfect feel for the songs. Mm-hmm. Like there's no, like it goes back to like no ego, no like macho-ness, just kind of this kind of wavelength, just like straight ahead, which is really cool. It kind of it just opened my ears. Like, oh, you could play that, you could play a faster 2 and 4 beat, but it doesn't have to like feel dangerous. It can feel kind of chill.
I do not understand what it is. I don't know. Before the holes, check for calls. Blink your eyes, won't forget to
Coming up, I was very inspired by punk rock, and I was in punk bands. So like, if I played either of those songs, it would just be like so much more like, you know, like, and there's none of that. It almost sounds more like drum and bass, where you sped up something that was played very lightly. You know, like all those like famous like drum and bass breaks. They kind of took like James Brown era funk beats and just sped them up. This kind of has 100%. That sound to it, but he's playing it And yeah.
I do have one more, and then I'm just going to quickly say all my
Cool.
honorable mentions. You talked about the live record called I Might Be Wrong. I chose this one specifically for you because the record version of I Might Be Wrong off Amnesiac is the most Gunnar beat that I can think of.
Ooh.
Yeah, I would feel that you would actually play this song the way if someone sent you this, I think you would actually do it this way.
I want to give a shout out to the guitarist of my band Mother Feather, Chris Foley. We have a lot of songs that tune down to D, and whenever he tunes down to D at rehearsal, he always plays this riff for like 2 seconds. And so
it's like a country riff. It's such a weird.
Yeah,
it's like
twangy.
Yeah.
So like he always like
Yeah.
tunes down, and I just kind of like jump in, and then the band's like, "Can we play our real music?" And then that's one of those beats that I feel like every drummer can play, but you will also be immediately revealed that you suck. Like it's a beat that we can all comprehend pretty much. But I feel like if I had to play that beat for 3 minutes, I would be like, can we just loop that? Because it's so it's not like,
hey guys,
there's something about that kind of beat. It's really hard to play super consistently for a whole song, and yeah, I like it goes back to the who knows what we're hearing on those records, but he definitely plays it live. I've definitely seen them play that song live. Yeah, it's like disco, but not disco funk.
Yeah, disco on acid maybe.
Maybe.
So the last two, there's Lotus Flower, which is off
Ooh,
King of Limbs.
that's good.
And his bass drum, you referenced this earlier, is so behind the beat when he does like the eighth notes, and that's probably one of the best examples of him playing an organic song that sounds like a drum machine.
That one's weird.
I love that
yeah,
song.
it's like there's 2 takes on that song. I know they've definitely played that live when Clive is playing second drums with them, and I've seen some video of that, and that's really cool because he kind of does the second part, the like the more.
Yes.
I don't know if they're delaying it or if they just took the same beat and displaced it. We'll never know. It's that's a great song. That's a really cool song.
My next one and last one is Separator, also off King of Limbs, and that one actually sounds like it should have been on In Rainbows. If you said that those were from the In Rainbows sessions, drum-wise, I'd believe you because it sounds the exact same. I believe it's the last song off King of Limbs.
It's like I've fallen out of every dream. The sweetest life.
It sounds like they. My first thought when I hear this is it sounds like they took a drum beat and sped it up. Like his hi, it almost sounds like he's playing like splash cymbals as hi hats.
Did we choose any from Pablo Honey or OK Computer? I don't think we did. We didn't pick any Kid A either, which is interesting.
I mean, yeah. I mean, those songs. for me, it just feels like those songs are a little more obvious, and maybe I'm looking at OK Computer. I mean, there's great songs on here. I mean, there's probably more of him playing on these songs than all the records we talked about. You know, it's probably more of him.
Gunnar, what's your Instagram? Why don't you talk about how people can find you?
It's at Fun Buns. It's at Gun Buns. GUNBUNS.
All right, Gunnar. Well, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for having me on the show. And cheers, man.
Hey, good luck with you. You know, on next week's podcast, I can't wait to show you guys what I have in store on my podcast that this is now. And it's going to be primarily the snare and tom sounds of Alex Van Halen. And we really look forward to having you back.
Yeah, guys, tell me how that episode goes, because I will not be listening to that one. So, but I'll talk to you later, Gunnar.
All right, bye.
Bye. And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using Isotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye!